Welcome to the IR Global podcast. IR Global is the largest international professional services network. I'm the host of the IR Digital podcast, Jennifer Riggins. Today we are speaking with Ross Nichols, Business Development Director at IR Global, and we are talking about the importance of building an international network, especially if you work in professional services. So I guess to start, Ross, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
I'm glad. It's quite meta to have the IR Global person on the IR Global podcast, but who better to talk about this topic then? So why don't you first start by sharing your professional journey with us?
Yeah, so IR Global started around 10 years ago. The founder was Tom Wheeler, who's actually my friend. I joined around 9 years ago, and the idea was to build a network of boutiques and mid-sized firms. Initially, it was law firms, but then we quickly realized that we wanted to expand into other professional services disciplines. So things like accountants, corporate finance advisors, because we understood that lawyers need to work with accountants, accountants need to work with lawyers. And so we wanted to provide a platform for boutiques and mid-sized firms to be able to show added value to their clients and their client base.
And what is your background that led you here?
Well, I was actually worked in industrial IT for a number of years. So it wasn't myself that was involved in professional services. That was really Tom's background. My background was in events. It was also dealing with businesses overseas, and I'd spent a lot of my career overseas. So I really understood from a cultural perspective what a lot of providers and end users were looking for. So my background, as I say, was events, dealing with international advisors. And so that really complemented Tom's basic knowledge and his understanding of professional services networks. So it was a good fit, and we are friends, and luckily we still remain friends, which is always which is interesting. So yeah, it's worked well. Tom is based out in Amsterdam, and I look after the office here in the UK.
And when you were working with overseas companies, were you based in the UK? Who were you working with? What companies or what countries at least?
Yes, so I worked a lot overseas. So I was based in the UK, but I spent quite a long time in France. I lived in Toulouse for around 12 months. But prior to that, my base was the UK. But each Monday morning, I'd fly off out of Heathrow to some part of Europe, whether it was Denmark, Iceland, Italy, wherever it may be. And then I'd spend all week there, and then I'd fly home on a Friday night. So quite a challenge, but I got to see lots of the world, but also a lot of hotel rooms, which can appear glamorous, but actually isn't that glamorous. And it's also not that good for the waistline either.
Fair enough. We all like to binge while traveling. It's a wonderful excuse if we can get reimbursed for our binging. So let's talk about, so you've been 9 years in this international global network space. What has changed for professional services over the last 9 years? I imagine networking has completely changed.
Well, I actually don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, the principles are the same. What advisors are looking for, and this would have been the same 9 years ago, it's the same today, it'll also be the same in 9 years' time. Advisors are looking to build trust and build relationships with other advisors. So how do you do that? You do that by getting to know people. You do that by meeting people, learning about their business, getting a chance to explain about your own business, because the only way you can really develop relationships in that sense is to meet people. Hopefully you like each other, because that's really, really important, particularly in professional services, because you can have difficult conversations at times. And it's much easier to resolve issues and problems if you get on well. And we're all humans, whether we're professional advisors or not. People want to do business with people that they like and that they respect. And so that hasn't changed 9 years ago. And that's still fundamentally, what people are looking for today. I think what we've realized in that 9 years is that's really just told us something that we already knew anyway. And that's not really going to change. And so some of the things that we do and what we see other networks doing is trying to increase the interaction between the members and between, the different types of advisors. Yes, there's a digital space, and that has changed significantly. And I guess we'll talk about that shortly. But in terms of the fundamentals about how people interact with each other, it hasn't changed.
That's super interesting because I feel like day to day I interact with less and less human beings in real life. It's mostly online. So, how does the digital landscape actually change this interaction or evolve it for different marketing strategies or firms or how they get their name out there? If word of mouth, I assume, is still the number one way.
Word of mouth is king. Yeah, word of mouth is king. I mean, in terms of how firms market themselves, yes, that has certainly changed. And I think 9 years ago, if you'd have asked lawyers and accountants around the world about social media, a handful of them would have engaged with you on it, but a lot of them would have thought, no, that's not for us. That's for kids. We don't see that as part of our business. We're selling on products and services and our reputation. They would almost see social media as perhaps not right for them or even beneath them. But I think that what they have learned over the last 9 years is that it is an important part of their business. And so digital marketing, it is all linked in with social media and how they portray themselves. And the conversations that we have now with members, it isn't about trying to sell the concept of social media. It's really about how they make best use of it. And that's really what our job is to demonstrate that to people.
So tell me more about that and how to help them demonstrate social media and how they can leverage social media to then support, I guess, augment their face-to-face meetings. Or does social media help set up those meetings, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, the two are separate. We'll talk about the face-to-face stuff in more detail. But in terms of the digital space, yes, a reminder, it is professional services. So the two main platforms that we are talking about are LinkedIn and Twitter. They do remain the two business platforms, and I don't necessarily see that changing at any point soon. What we're educating our members and advisors around the world is to use short bursts of information, whether that be blogs, whether that be short articles. The tendency, podcasts within professional services, there's a tendency to over elaborate and go into a huge amount of detail. You've probably seen that. That isn't actually what people want. People are very busy. People are taking in bite-sized information. People want to have short, sharp information. They want to understand quickly about the products and the services. They want to deal in facts and figures, particularly in professional services. So what we're trying to educate people on is, look, you don't have to go into whole reams and lots of details, thousands of words, because it's just not going to get read. So that's been an education for people. And what we're saying to them is, look, just provide it in bite-sized information. People are still getting that message. If they do want to find out more information about you, then for sure they can get in contact and have a more specific conversation with you. But if you are looking to show your human side, that you're smart, that you're clever, that you know what's happening locally, what's going on in your own jurisdictions, the best way to do that is within that bite-sized information. And that's been an education for us to them.
Well, even in face-to-face, when you meet a lawyer or an accountant, often they go off on a tangent about what they do instead of saying who they serve in their elevator pitch, what problem they fix. And I hope social media is actually helping people streamline that in their profiles and headlines and things.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I have at least 100 people add me on LinkedIn a week. That doesn't mean I would remember any of them if I met them in real life and they said, oh, I met you on LinkedIn, but vice versa. If I met them in real life first, IRL, and then they added me on LinkedIn with a specific follow-up of information, I think it creates a long-lasting impression. So how does that happen? How does IR Global forge those in-person #IRL meetings?
Yeah, the LinkedIn contact's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, yes, we all have people that contact us, and in the past I have accepted people when I've looked at them and thought, oh yeah, it could be interesting, but then when they have followed it up an hour later with a big long sales pitch,
super spammy.
It's the worst thing you can possibly do. Nobody appreciates that. I don't know who's telling these people to do it. So you have to be very careful about who you accept. From a personal perspective, I only accept people on LinkedIn that I've met, or I will have many shared contacts with people that I know and respect. So LinkedIn is a great platform for that, but it does need to be carefully managed. And I think that some of that is just a common sense for people. I mean, we have regular conferences. And quite often what happens afterwards is, people they've got their business cards, they'll search for them on LinkedIn and they'll connect with them. And that is absolutely the right thing to do. So you've still got to share interesting content. You've still got to share your own personal story, things that are relevant about your own jurisdiction or your own firm. But again, keep it in short, bite-sized information without being too over-salesy. Because quite often when you meet at an international conference, you may not need that contact again for 6 months, a year. But if you still have that contact with them, whether it be on LinkedIn or even if you meet them again, if you've met somebody, the brain works in a very interesting way and does remember these people. You can actually go back to them 12 months later and think, oh yeah, I remember that guy. I met him for coffee, or I met him for over a glass of wine. Yeah, actually, I do have an issue in a particular jurisdiction, and I did like that person, and I'm going to get back in touch, and I'm sure they'll remember me. And then LinkedIn is a great tool to be able to do that, but you do have to use it carefully.
Absolutely. There's a lot of spam out there, but that's part of the issue of it. But I'm sure it must work for some people. They also say, I believe the statistic is nowadays to convert a lead into or prospect into a client, it takes about 12 points of contact information. And nowadays that could be your newsletter. That could be writing a blog post. It could be just a post on LinkedIn, posting regularly to nurture that, to stay on top of mind of that person you've already met in real life. So one of the things about IR Global, obviously, is in its name, it's global. When you think of accountants, when you think of lawyers, the stereotype is very local. It's very your local network. It's your town lawyer. Like my dad had a town lawyer that would take care of our mortgages and whatever else. How does that translate in the international world? Why is it important to have an international network if you are in these well-regulated, often locally regulated spaces?
Yeah, so I think within towns, you're right, there is the local guy to support the local village, town, city, whatever it may be. But there is an increasing number of firms within professional services that are looking to grow their cross-border work by nature. So those local guys that small office, they're perhaps not suitable to join a global network because they're not going to see the value from it. They're not going to be able to pass across work. They won't necessarily have the client base that is looking for international advice. So for them, it's not really suitable for them to engage with a company such as ourselves. But there are boutiques, and particularly the mid-sized firms, that are looking to grow their cross-border nature. And yes, that's the fundamental is how do you build a network? So you have to build that trust. You have to build that understanding. Some people that we know, many of our members, in fact, they will only refer cases to somebody else if they've met them in person. That's just a rule that they have. And so how do you do that? Yes, there's conferences, and we run our own conferences, and we run our own regional meetings. But more often than these days, people are traveling extensively. And so one of the things that we always recommend to people is, look, if you're going to take the time to visit another city, look up, one of your colleagues and then set up a meeting with them. Even if it's just for 20 minutes, half an hour, a quick coffee, an introduction, a sandwich, you can develop a huge amount within that 20 minutes. You can develop a relationship with somebody, and you do get to understand about them, their business, whether you like them, because you are making judgments on people. We're all making judgments on people straight away, positive and negative. And so you can really establish that within those short meetings. We recommend you don't spend all day with somebody because everybody's very busy. They don't have the time for that. You probably don't have the time for that. But if you can meet a series of people, 20 minutes, half an hour on the move, a coffee, even a lunch, those things are really, really, really powerful. And that is how you build the network. And then aside from that, yes, you want to be doing all the digital stuff, the articles, the blogs, the social media, and that sort of sits alongside and complements the face-to-face relationships that you're trying to develop.
If you're planning to attend a thought leadership conference where there's a lot of people in your network, or people that should be in your network, hopefully, and benefit from eventually, how do you prepare for that event? What do you do ahead to make sure you plan your meetings, or should you just show up and be at a networking, or maybe there's a speed networking somewhere, or how do you get prepared for that?
Yeah, so the preparation is very, very important. I mean, yes, you've got to be looking at the schedule. You've got to be looking for the work you should be doing in advance. Quite often, at conferences. There are specific topics and workshops, and if you're not prepared, it doesn't reflect well on you. And we've seen some people who are incredibly well prepared and they get more value from it. Other people do just sort of turn up and go, oh, I'm so busy, oh, I haven't had time, and it doesn't necessarily reflect that well on them. So preparation is important. Look, some people are naturally better networkers than others, absolutely, and we understand that. So one of the things that we've learned over the years is you have to be able to provide the professional sessions, but also the social sessions as well. So some advisors, they much prefer to do their business in a more formal environment, in a particular breakout session covering a very particular topic. Some people feel much more comfortable doing that. That's important. But other people want to do their business in a more social session because it's about their relationship development. So some people want to do their business over a coffee. Some people want to do it over a glass of wine. Others want to do it in perhaps a social session or a sports session, a getaway session. Those sessions are important. So for us, what we try and do is to provide an environment for both the professional sessions and the social sessions, because everybody's different and everybody connects with people in different ways. And you do end up meeting more like-minded people if you do your sessions that way.
And I would add to that to definitely pay attention to the conference hashtag. If you're allowed to tweet or also on LinkedIn post as you as an individual, which these organizations, these law firms, these accounting firms should want that. They want to trust they are the best representatives of the human side of their brand. There will be an official post by the official organization, but they should be doing that. And I found that
absolutely,
if I do nothing else on Twitter, if I live tweet during a conference day, I'll get 100 followers. They'll remember me more during the conference. It leads to the next day. I get more people coming to me and talking to me, which is really nice. Now, yes, face-to-face is best, but I think we all have short-term memory loss and we have a time frame for when to act on something. So after you've met someone at a conference, what should you be preparing to do afterwards to nurture that relationship into a long-term friendship or professional relationship?
Yeah, it's a good point. Everyone follows up after a conference, and we always recommend that everyone follows up. And we always say to people, look, if you go to a conference and there's maybe several hundred people there, you're not going to have connections with everybody. You're absolutely not. But if you can come away from a meeting or a conference and maybe you've got 5 or 10 really good contacts where you think, oh, do you know what, that could really help my client in the future, or I believe that I can work with that person, or they may have some opportunities for me to grow my business, those are the ones that you need to cultivate. So yes, everybody follows up after an event, but it's not just about doing that connection on LinkedIn or in some other form. It's about setting a plan to follow up regularly with them. So whether that's every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, sharing your own news and updates. Perhaps you want to arrange a meeting with them next time you're in town, send them a personal invitation if they're ever in your city. Perhaps you've discussed a relevant sector or a specific area of business. If you've had some success in the following months, then you really should be sharing that news and information with them. You could say, look, I remember our conversation, wherever it may be. I thought you would find this information relevant. So even if you're just sort of staying in touch with them loosely every few months, you're keeping that contact with them and you're making them feel special, and they will remember that particular conversation. So it's not just about following up once. You've got to set a strategy every few months. I hear it all the time. People go to conferences. Well, I've connected with him on LinkedIn. Yeah, I've done my bit. Yeah, that's it. I've got a connection there. Well, that's all well and good, but that's not really the right way to do it, because, as I say, most people follow up after a conference. It's about having that strategy afterwards to stay in touch with people.
And I think you just have to schedule time for that in your day, because while these accountants and lawyers and international business analysts, etc., work for firms, they are working kind of as mini entrepreneurs in those firms. So there's always something more you can do. So if you don't schedule that time for, maybe you've spent a week at a conference or half a week at a conference, but the next week, if you don't schedule a couple of hours to plan to follow up with those people, you probably never will. Because that's always something you're going to put off because it's not on your calendar. So if you put it on your calendar, you're more likely to do it. Doesn't guarantee it, but it can definitely help. How many of these firms actually have a lead development funnel, have a CRM, a contact management system in place? So they then remind themselves to do it. Maybe these people then also get feeded through the traditional marketing avenues of like the newsletter of the company and things like that. Do you find that a lot of your IR Global network are doing that as well within GDPR guidelines?
Yes and no. I mean, we have some firms that are particularly small. They maybe have 2 or 3 people, but they're still doing international work. It's more of a challenge for them to do those things, and they don't produce newsletters. They don't necessarily produce those articles. They are more reliant on the face-to-face contact and the people that they've met. But yes, for sure, in some of the more medium-sized firms, they will have a marketing person, a business development person, and yes, that does form part of their strategy. GDPR has been a challenge in the last 12 to 18 months.
GDPR doesn't care about those 3-person firms, so I don't think they have to worry about it.
No, they don't. But if in professional services, you have to be compliant. You have to be seen to be doing absolutely the right thing. So if you aren't complying with GDPR, even though you are, Mr. Small Guy, it doesn't reflect well on your business. So we've spent a huge amount of time last year, in particular. I think it was May last year, 2018, that GDPR first came into effect, and people have spent a huge amount of time and expense getting themselves ready. And yes, okay, it hasn't affected them yet per se, but it potentially will do in the future. And if you hadn't done all those things 18 months ago, it could potentially cause you problems in the future. So because we're in professional services, we have to be extra cautious with that.
No,
point.
It makes sense. And also people aren't paying attention to certain things on their website that both Google and laws require, like that the websites are accessible, that the websites are mobile friendly, just simple things. Keep everything simple. I would recommend that they definitely need some sort of contact management system.
Yes.
That they can keep track of their contacts. And I would recommend they have some sort of workflow with it. So maybe everyone gets an automatic email. Is it okay I add you to this list? If not,
yes.
You can opt out.
Absolutely.
It's better to ask right after than before.
Absolutely.
And if they're doing on one medium, they can do on the rest. So if you write a short blog post on LinkedIn, that's not your website. There's no need to worry about duplicate content. Put it in a newsletter that replies to whoever on your team you want it to reply to. I think it's silly to not do a newsletter in this day and age. You have these contacts. It's the quickest way to nurture them. And it's still, despite GDPR, still the biggest way to hit them in the inbox. Also, there's tools that people don't use that would be great for law firms, like email signature, because the email signature, everyone's sending emails. You can put ads in those. You can put thought leadership in there. There's a lot of way to nurture them, but you still have to first have that first meeting, the first handshake.
Yes.
That eye contact makes a great difference. And don't forget, like afterwards when you're following up with people, try not to pick up the phone. Try to get them on a video conference at least. People will be more likely to remember you afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note that it is professional services. They don't necessarily have to be at the cutting edge of social media and the latest trends, but they don't have to be that. They're not trying to launch a trainer. They're not trying to launch a new perfume or a new car.
It doesn't have to be beautiful. It can be an email without images will be most likely read and opened.
Yeah. And I think the point you make about the newsletters is important because people are still reading those. As I say, so long as you're not it's overkill and there's too much information on there. People are looking at them and again taking in that bite-sized information. That's still valuable, and it's still better than perhaps the work they were doing several years ago. So it's still work in progress, but we see that as our job at IR Global to educate them and to show them what they can and can't and shouldn't do based upon how time poor they are. And yes, some people, as I say, they have those departments, others don't. You do have to manage your time effectively.
Even the little ones, I would suggest you set goals, like maybe 2 emails this year, 3 the following year, things like that. Just track everything to try to put it out there, but also focus on what you're good at. These are all especially if they're working with cross-border deals. They're thought leaders in their specific areas. And it's important that you promote and cultivate what you're actually good at and what you're comfortable with talking about, because it makes it so much easier if you're talking about something you're passionate about. And that's a great topic to bring up. And if you're not passionate about something else, that's a great way to bring up a conversation with someone else. Just ask a lot of questions to learn their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people quickly understand if you are talking to them or you've met them and you're talking about a particular subject matter, and perhaps you know something of it, but you're not an expert on it, you can quickly pick up that passion and you can quickly pick up that expertise. And when you're looking for cross-border work and you're looking for somebody to provide a solution and to solve a problem for you, because that's effectively what we're looking to do, you do get that level of expertise and understanding from somebody, and you can get that very quickly. And as I say, I go back to the fact that people are trying to build trust and understanding. And if you're going to pass across one of your very precious clients who you've worked a long time for, and they are setting up a new entity or they're entering a new jurisdiction or they need specific advice, you want to have full confidence that they're going to do a really, really good job on your behalf. Because if they don't, it reflects badly on you. So that's where you're trying to build this trust and understanding. That's the most important commodity people have in professional services, is their reputation.
Their word. And if it only takes a moment to break that word. It
Yeah.
can take years to build that trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else you think I should be asking you, Ross, about the IR Global Network? How do you find your members? How do you vet them?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of what we do these days is recommendations. I mean, we have roughly 1,000 members globally in 155 jurisdictions. So in a lot of more mature markets, we've got to the levels that we need to, and we're comfortable with that. We're always looking at new and emerging markets to find advisors. But for us, the best way of getting it is a recommendation. So if we know somebody and we trust them, one of our members, and we know them particularly well, we will say to them, look, we are looking for a particular expert in this particular niche market and this particular jurisdiction. Can you recommend somebody? You know what IR Global is about. You know what we're looking to achieve. Can you recommend somebody that's going to fit into the group? Because it's about the personality as well as the firm. And so we're looking for people that are going to embrace our message, and we are looking for people that are going to buy into our concept and what we're looking to achieve. And that's best done by asking somebody for a recommendation. And so you've almost done the vetting at this point, because you've asked somebody who you trust. Of course, you have to vet them thoroughly. We have a vetting process that normally takes us about a week. We run background checks on everybody, every individual. We speak to local members. The internet's a wonderful thing to be finding out about people. It really is. So yeah, we use all those tools. We don't, before we allow anybody to join our group, of course we have to vet them fully, because we're only as strong as our weakest member. And so if we have somebody that's let us down or somebody else down, that doesn't reflect well on the rest of the group. So we have to be really, really careful. I mean, the way that we have our own infrastructure is every member is on a rolling 12-month basis, because the 12 months is a safety measure, not only for us, but also for the member. We have to make sure that they're happy as well. And so we review all memberships every few months anyway, on regular contact calls, but formally every 12 months, to make sure that the membership is working for the member, but also for us as well. And the odd occasions where we do have issues, it enables us to part company with members if, the synergy is not right.
And when it comes down to it, trust and word of mouth is king or queen, as you said.
Indeed.
Ruling above anything else. That's
Yes.
all the time we have for today, but I'm sure there are folks listening who'd like to learn more about the IR Global Network, or maybe just to get in touch and have that 20-minute cup of coffee conversation with you. So what's the best way for them to contact you, Ross?
Yeah, so I'm Ross Nichols of IR Global, and the best way to contact me is via email. My email is ross@IRglobal. That's ROSS @IRGLOBAL.com. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ross, for taking the time to talk with us today. And thank you, listeners. These IR Digital podcasts are meant to be educational resources from experienced lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors with extensive knowledge on topics you as professionals need to know about, just like this networking today. To learn more about IR Digital and its services, please visit irglobal.com. And if you found this episode useful, please consider sharing it. I'll talk to you in the next one. Thank you.